Hello dear friends, welcome to my channel. If you're new, my name is Colleen and I'm delighted to have you here, and if you're returning, thanks for stopping by. I hope that we'll have a good time together. I've been preparing some little gifts to go in cards this Christmas, and I'd like to show you what I've been doing. So I've been taking some of these wooden cutouts and decorating them. What you're going to need for this is some book page, or in my case I'm using a very old Bible that I bought from a charity shop that was literally falling apart, and I'm going to use some of those pages. You'll need some matte medium or some Mod Podge. You'll need some acrylic paint, and I'm using an opaque white because although these are light colors, I'm using quite a light background and I want to actually have it nice and crisp. I've got a little spritz bottle with water just to thin my paints down a bit. I have a file just for neatening up my edges, and I have a very soft bristled brush. This is Tacklon, my tongue's getting twisted, which is a synthetic fiber, but it's very nice and fine and it's very soft. And then I also have a little pokey tool to be able to remake the holes once I've actually done my basically decoupage on this. So you could use napkins, and when you are selecting your napkins, the sort of things that you would be looking for would be something that has quite a large all over pattern, and then you'd be able to put your napkin underneath that so that you can kind of position where you'd like the design to go. It's quite a lot easier if you hold this up against the window because you'll be able to see the light shining through from the other side. I don't think I can get that on camera, but you do want to sort of try and work out where the design is going to be. You'll also know, if you've done any decoupage with napkins before, that normally they come with 2 plies, which is 2 layers, or sometimes even 3. And you're wanting to separate them so that you've just got the top layer, not this bubbly little bit underneath, and those 2 layers there. So you want to take those off. If I was using something soft like this sort of leaf design, you could actually tear that up so that you could actually position this on your cutout as you wished. I don't like using scissors when I'm actually working with napkins because I find they give very hard edges, especially if you're going to do kind of a collage effect on the wooden cutout. I prefer to tear mine. So you'd see a design like this would actually give me quite a nice background on my cutout here. I could position it so that the leaves almost were coming out of the dove's mouth and stick that down. But you could play around as you wish, depending on what napkins you've got. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is to paint our little cutouts, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So to start with, I'd just like to show you the contrast between a painted and an unpainted little bird, and you'll see that this one is definitely a brighter finish to it. I've also gone over with a little bit of a wash of white paint, almost, not completely evenly over the edges, but I've tried to get rid of some of this darkness that you have around a laser cut edge. You could actually leave it if you wanted to accentuate your design, but for my purposes I want it to be quite nice and light. So this is the kind of finish that I'm looking for. I'm going to use my spritz bottle to just dilute my paint slightly because I'd want it to spread very evenly. So to begin with, I'm going to just spritz my brush first, so that's wet all over, and that means that it's not going to really make the bristles terribly sticky. And then I'm going to put some paint on, but while the paint is still on my brush, I'm going to just spritz that. I know it's a bit of a crazy way of doing it, but it works for me. Alright, so now I'm going to use my brush just to spread this evenly around. And to begin with, you'll notice that my brush strokes are quite noticeable, but the more you brush over them, the smoother they'll be. Remember also that the wood is going to be very, very absorbent, so it's just going to soak up all this lovely juicy paint. Make sure you get right into the corners of these areas. And my little bit of paint that I put on now is still quite thick, so I'm going to just give it another quick spritz with my bit of water just to get it to spread evenly. Right, now the secret to getting nice even paint is that I've spread it on sort of the longer length here. Now I'm going to brush it in the opposite direction. This also helps to make sure that you don't miss any areas. And then I'm going to turn my little bird around and brush it lengthways again. But you'll notice I'm not applying any more paint. I'm just brushing with what I've got on my brush. I can already see by tilting it in the light any little areas that I might have missed. Rotate it again, and I'm just going to keep doing this until the paint looks nice and flat and evenly spread. My last lot of brushing I'd like to be along the length of the bird, just because if a bird is in flight, that's the kind of movement that you would get. So the last one I'm going to do, it's going to be this way, and the paint has spread nice and evenly. But it's almost inevitable when you're doing this and you've got cut edges that you're going to have a little bit of seepage through here, unless you're one of those super neat painters. So I'm just going to use my brush to gently go into these edges. And as I said, I wanted to get a lighter feel to mine, so I'm painting these. Do you have to be just a little bit careful when you're doing this, just to get your brush right in and make sure that you've covered everything. All the way to the edges, along this side, and I will need to catch the drips once I'm finished. So yes, I am aware that it's probably dripping over the side that I've just painted already, but that's okay. If the edges aren't 100% even, that's not a problem either. So I'm going to go all the way to the edge, all the way around. In true style to me, I'm getting nice and messy as I'm doing it. I really admire those of you that can paint so neatly you don't even get any on you. My granddaughter's like that, and my grandson, they're terribly careful, and when they paint a canvas, you know, or doing a picture, there's never more than is needed on there, and never get mess anywhere. But unfortunately, I don't know, I must have skipped that gene. Anyway, just checking that I've covered all these little bits and bobs here. And now once again, I'm just going to finally take all these little sort of licks of paint that are spilt over it, and I'm just going to brush those in, making sure that I don't have any ridges, anything that might just look ugly. So I'm going over it again, but I'm quite happy that the paint is now nice and smooth, and I've actually covered my surface. I'll put this onto some of this blue, gosh, what do you call these tiles here in this country? Oh, these ones. I've actually forgotten what you call them in the UK, but yeah, anyway, we used to just call them dish swabs back home, but J-cloths, that's what you call them, J-cloths. Okay, I'm learning a whole lot of new languages here. I thought we all spoke English, but words have different meanings here. So I find if I put them onto the J-cloth, then the paint doesn't really stick, unlike paper, if I had to leave my design on paper. So I'm going to leave that to dry completely on this side, and then I'll flip my design over and paint on the other side. So that's what I'm going to do with all of my little birds. So I've selected a page from Psalms that I've taken out, which has got some quite nice positive words, and I'm going to use my little bird to try and lay up the design. So I want to be careful to know that this is a mouth, so the mouth could say something, and I would like to have something that sort of almost defines the wings. So I've got a saying here, say among the nations, and I thought if I lined that up with the mouth, it would maybe take the scripture to the edge there, but I need to get the wing down here a little bit, so I'm just going to reorientate it, and I'll see that I'll have a bit of colour at the edge of the wings here if I'm using my fingers just to fashion it down. So I'm going to now put some matte medium onto my wooden cutout. Oopsie, I always forget that this is such a stiff lid. I'm squeezing it onto my brush rather than making a big mess on my cutout. I'm going to spread it all the way to the edge, making sure that I've got enough so that I can see that it's wet and shining, so that I know that when I put my page down that it's going to stick well. Spread that all the way up to the top. Especially the edges. You want the edges to be nice and secure. And then I'm going to spread it this way as well. I might just put a little bit more on. Right, so all the way to the edges. Right, so you've got to kind of remember where you were with your text and getting things right. So my words will say among the nations, and I want that to be where the mouth is, and to get my bird. Okay, once you've made a decision, commit to it, otherwise you're going to find that you're going to really battle. Now I'm just going to grab a pair of scissors. And I'm not going to try and cut around the bird at this stage while it's wet, but I am going to trim away some of this excess paper. Maybe if I turned it over it would be easier, hey? It's funny when you're making these videos, I often think to myself, you're probably sitting in your chair saying, no, don't do it like that, do it like this. Anyway, make sure that as you're working that you keep pressing the edges so that they stick. And you want you to leave about 1/2 centimeter all the way around the edges. Just like that. And just like that. Now for those of you that sew, you know that if you're putting a sleeve into a garment, that you need to actually have little notches just to ease it around corners. And it's going to be pretty much the same as this. So while this is still drying on here, I'm going to take my scissors and just gently cut into these little sort of recessed areas, and I'm going to make a couple of little nicks along here just so that when I come to clean up the edges it's going to be easier to remove the paper in pieces rather than trying to do it all in one section, especially in little corners like that. That's just something that I've found really helpful. And it's important to leave this to be completely dry before you start to try and remove the excess paper, otherwise you stand the tendency of really tearing into the paper. So make sure it's all the way nice, secure to the edges. You can start to see the shape of your little bird here if you press the paper down, and you'll see how nicely these Bible pages have gone down without any wrinkles whatsoever. You might find, depending on your skill level with your napkins, if you were using those, you might find you possibly might get odd wrinkles, but it is still small, so maybe not. But the secret to working with napkins is that you must make sure that you always have a lot of matte medium. You could use Mod Podge on your brush so that your brush never goes dry, because when your brush goes dry, that's when you start to have problems. And the other tip is not to overwork your things, rather just leave it. Right, so I'm going to leave that to dry, and then we're going to come back to that and clean it all up and do the other side. Okay, so this has had some time to dry, so I'm going to just take this file or my emery board, and I'm just going to work almost at a 45-degree angle, rubbing up against the edge of the wood. And this is going to just sand through that last layer of paper and give you a really nice clean image, far better than if you were trying to cut with a pair of scissors. You'll see that this will start to come away. There we go, look how nicely that's coming away. Let me just get to the little corner here. Okay, all the way to the edge now. And then you're going to work in between each of these little recessed areas. So I'm going to not stop talking now, and I'll just carry on so I can speed this up for you. Okay, so I'm happy that I've got that done nicely. If you wanted to, you could touch up around the edges, but I'm going to do some inking here, so I'm not going to worry about that. And now I'm going to do exactly the same on the other side. Remove the background, catch any of these little bits. You sometimes might need to just get your blade of your scissor in to catch in these tight angles any little bits which might be there. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to do the other side, trim it down, and then I'll show you how we're going to decorate it. Okay, so I've cleaned up my little bird all the way around here, and now I just want to remake this hole. So I've got this little pokey tool. You can pretty much see where the indentation is here on the paper. So I'm just going to gently poke it through from one side before going all the way through to the other side and then the other, and then I'm just going to wiggle it around just to make it a little bit longer. I don't want to push too hard from the front to the back to begin with, because that might dislodge the paper, which is quite close to the end. So just trying to make it a nice even sized hole on both sides. And then I'm going to take some Distress ink, the vintage photo, and just one of my little sponge brushes. And I'm just gently going to ink the edges of this. I just feel it will give it just a softness as opposed to being just completely stark white. If you just look at the contrast between those two, one looks plain and the other one just looks a little bit more finished. I'm just going to lightly go around the edges, almost working at a 45-degree angle. When you think of it, this is a bit like putting that mount that you have when you do framing, and you're putting a picture into a frame, and you normally have a piece of coloured card around it just to draw your eye in. This does exactly the same thing. It draws your eyes inward and creates it so that it's a bit more focal. So I'm going to do this on both sides, because as I'm giving these as gifts, they might be put on a Christmas tree, or they could be hung on a door, or whatever, that people might decide to use it. So you don't know if they're going to see both sides. So I'm just going to ink both sides just to make sure that they look neat on both sides. Just a very gentle application. If you haven't got these distress inks, you could quite easily use something like a gold pen to go around the outside edges, or a silver pen. You could use paint, whatever your choice is. So I'm going to set that aside. Now I have some of these beads on a thread, and I'm going to thread this through the hole first, just because I think this will be a bit more tricky. I'm just going to take a couple of beads off so I can twist the ends together. And the hole is quite nice and big, so I'm hoping I don't have too many problems. Make use of whatever tools you have just to help you get this through. I'm not going to cut the length just yet. The second thing I'm going to do is to take some of this double-sided satin ribbon, and I'm just going to cut one end at an angle, so I'm making a point. I'm going to slide this in as well. Now for this, because I've already got beads in there, I might need to use my little pokey tool. So I'm just going to hold that and just push it through. Once you've got it through to the other side, it's a lot easier. There we go. And then normally to hang something, you want about 15 centimeters of ribbon. So I think it might be a bit long. Let's just make it slightly shorter. and we want to match these so that they're all the same length. Now when I come to cut the beads, I'm going to take a few beads off at the end because they're going to fall off in any case once I come to tie the edge. So it's going to make it easier just to tie it just with the thread part here. Quite hard to tie when I've just got the beads. And I'm going to take my ribbon and kind of twist it with the bead on either side, the bead thread, just so that it doesn't look awkward when it's lying separately. And I'm going to do the same on this side. Just twist one over the other. Probably 3 times will be enough. And then I'm going to grab all the ends together like that. And then I'm just going to tie them as best I can once. So here you might need to use your little pokey tool to get all the little bits through. Yep, I'm going to need to redo that. So because I've got the beads, it's making it a little bit more bulky and not as easy to tie as if it was just ribbon. I'm simply wanting to tie a knot. But let's not be defeated by a few beads. Take that one off maybe. And we're going to just push that through. And oh no, it hasn't worked. Okay, I might have to do this separately. You could also, if you wanted to, just use a little bit of glue to glue those edges together before you tie them. But because this is proving too thick, I'll tell you what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tie the beaded one first. Twist the ends a little bit. Get that to come through. So I've got a nice knot. And then I'm going to do the same with this. And then the last little bit of decoration is that I'd like to have a sentiment on here. And just as alternatives, if you wanted to, you could have used something like a gold twine like that as well, or any other color ribbon, or just even a piece of embroidery thread. So I have these, which are called bulb pins. You can buy these online at Amazon. Quite a lot of places have them. And I have some little sentiments in metal that have different words. So I think I'm going to actually just use the silver one here, and I'm going to loop it through my beads and my ribbon, and then I'm just going to pop one of these on. But you'll have to just wait and see how it hangs. Okay, that's hung beautifully, because sometimes you might need to turn the sentiment over just so that it lies nicely on the actual piece of wood. Let me see if this is going to do the trick here. No, I think I must turn it over. And this you won't know until you've actually come to pop it onto the surface. So let's just turn this over. Thread this through again. There we go. So I've got my little sentiment that says grace. I have another one here that says blessed. And I've got my verses of scripture nicely inked up. But as I say, you could have done these with some book pages if you wished. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give me a thumbs up. Consider subscribing to my channel. And yeah, look out for the next video. I do one at least one a week. Bye for now.